Alex Kister, creator of one of, if not the most influential internet series on the unhealthy void at the moment. In just under 2 years, he's blazed a trail across a newly revived genre and brought this new style of horror to the forefront of over 570,000 people's minds. Using a combination of fear and an ingenious story, he's caught the attention of some of the most notable creators/losers on the internet, and reached audiences far beyond what analog horror was thought capable of. A modern digital artist that's analog-inspired work stands out as a voice above the mediocrity of the average internet drivel. His artistic undertaking, unsurprisingly, has inspired much of the analog horror material floating around currently. Today, we will be investigating his series and what the deal is.
You fucking bastard!
Alex started his channel in June of 2021, and his channel since then has grown exponentially, amassing 576,000 subscribers and over 20 million views. This exponential growth is thanks to his self-made series, the Mandela Catalogue, which is the topic of this video, and which saw its initial video Overthrown released on the 10th of June 2021, capturing the fascination of the internet. Overthrown may carry the overall style, but gives little insight into this story / the lore. So let's have a look. So to begin with, our story starts with an informative graphic. This is our first introduction to the new threat that faces humanity, the alternate / replicant.
We are currently receiving countless reports of an unidentified hostile organism that we'll refer to as alternates.
In this government graphic, you're informed on how to identify a replicant and how to defend your life and those around you from a replicant. To show you how urgent the situation is, the viewer of the video is informed that they should kill themselves if at all they are found overwhelmed by a replicant, clearly showing that it is better to kill yourself than to die at its hands. In the informative, it also runs through the different types of replicant, from a doppelganger which once in contact steals your face, to a completely distorted type of replicant that loses all recognition of humanity, sometimes appearing faceless and regularly appearing with wildly elongated limbs. The tape ends with the infographic providing its consent for the general public to take up arms against these monsters. Then begins our first Mandela Catalogue story, the story of Mark Heathcliff and Cesar Torres. Late one night, Cesar calls on Mark to go over to his house and turn on his home security. Previously, Cesar had found his mother unconscious in his home and has taken her to the hospital. Initially, Mark is apprehensive about going to the house as he finds Cesar's house creepy. However, decides it's what he should do for his friend, and so off he goes. Once the cameras are switched on, Mark leaves and we can see the footage recorded before the old bag hit the floor. Anyway, everything seems fine until we hear the distressing audio of a woman screaming. Then a distorted image of Cesar pops up, and a text from Mark to Cesar comes on screen reading, "It followed me home, Cesar."
Who are you? Get away from me! No!
Mark receives no response, which leads us to the distressing knowledge that Cesar is a replicant and has now hitched a ride to Mark's house, where he remains on the other side of Mark's bedroom door, awaiting him to open the door, in which case he will 100% be murdered and possibly have his face stolen. Eventually, after Mark has exacerbated all his efforts and received no help from anyone, that thin defense creaks open, and Mark's slim hope for survival slams shut. Volume 1 ends with a child psychology tape that documents a child's experience with a replicant. So, Volume 2 takes us to the winter of 2009, where we encounter the Bythorn Paranormal Society, a couple of fellas who are out to uncover people's creepy, alternate, and paranormal experiences. Anyway, they get called to a house on the hunt for the soul of a woman's cat. It quickly becomes apparent to us all that these two swell fellas are actually criminals on the run. At 11:45, they arrive at the crazy cat lady's house and begin the investigation. The investigation ends with one of the two guys, called Adam, going down into a creepy basement where a visual image of a cat and a replicant face appears on an old fatback television. It's pretty obvious that our boy who stayed behind in the basement is sure as hell dead, And so ends volume 2. Okay, moving on. The big one, volume 3, is the most recent volume we have, and what a trip. This volume is a real mishmash, and I don't want to over-explain it, as it's a real lump, but I will mention we actually do get to meet a lanky bastard stick insect replica in the flesh, which is pretty cool. This episode mostly ties up loose ends from the previous 2 volumes, using multiple different characters and angles. To be honest, I think you're better off watching it. I can't explain it. I wouldn't do it justice. There's too much. So just go watch it. If you're watching this, then you probably already know that this series was one of, if not the first breakout series that captivated analog horror in its redefined state. Alex Kister created this series out of a bedroom and an idea. The level of detail in this series is beautiful. The horror that this series has caught and visualized is astounding. To so many, including me, this was the art that, like a flare, drew my attention back into analog horror. I think I can confidently say that without this series, the space we spend our wasted hours churning through wouldn't be the same. If that video had never been released, and that spark had never been cultivated into the inferno that is Mandela Catalogue, the work of others who were inspired never would have taken place. The stories inside this series are naturally received differently than others. And to be honest, it's hard to explain. Possibly the mix of 90s and 2000s styling, but somehow it seems to connect in a different way than any other analog series. The creation of an entirely different complex world that has forked away from our world somewhere in the 90s and is now running on its own rails. The idea of replicants, something that no one knows where they came from, but are now the cause of countless horror stories, and also the cause of the Mandela Catalogue world. This series leaves you with more questions than answers, while still making you feel like you're an expert. It's inspired a generation. Such organic visual art is priceless, and takes a certain type of person and a set of irregular events to combust. The overwhelming success of this series isn't set to stop anytime soon. However, it will eventually burn off with time. It's not something that is easily forgettable, and I doubt it will fade away and out of the minds of those who experience it, for several decades at least. My personal wish is that it never will evaporate. Maybe someday in this century or the next, a very different certain person, with their own irregular circumstance, will create a very unique piece of shattering art inspired by Alex Kister's Mandela Catalogue.